So that's, like I said before, the non-negotiables are exactly that. They are non-negotiable. But the flavor of your school, the model of your school, the way you go about it, that's entirely up to you. So I just wanted to start with that. So in case everyone thought that there's only one way to do this thing, there isn't only one way. I've just shared with you that we're going around the country, discovered that there are many ways to use this curriculum. So that was very exciting for me. So, okay, so we can, okay, it's gone, right. So I'm going to pretty much read through my notes because I've got quite a bit to get through. And then I see that it says Q&A as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my notes, hopefully address most stuff, and then if there is time, I can then have questions and answers at the end. But hopefully I will answer your question before you even need to ask it. So, because I've got to get through quite a bit here, so hopefully we can do that. So a lot of people ask, what is God's will for my life? And I alluded to it earlier, and it's actually very simple. For everybody, staff, learners, parents, everyone alike, is that God wants you to be successful. He's invested in your success because He created you and deposited stuff, we'll call it that, into you and to all your learners to be successful.
Thank you.
And then the other thing that I want to highlight to you is that those of you who got your diaries for this year as a gift from us, somewhere in February you will have read at the bottom of the page that success only comes before work in the dictionary. Success only comes before work in the dictionary. You don't get successful before you've put in a bunch of work. So for you all and your learners, so it's important that yes, you are designed to be successful, but at the same time you need to work. So as we moved around, we saw the various different models of the school, and we noticed that, but everybody's using the individualized. So what you need to understand is there's individualized, which is children working independently, so on their own, and then there's also personalized. So within the platform, you can personalize the material as well. So you can add your own special projects. You can adjust the thresholds. You can adjust the attempts. Making sure that you always keep in mind the non-negotiables. Okay, so the attempts with the quizzes and the tests cannot be adjusted. However, remember that the important thing when it comes to lessons of the 4 components, the lesson component, the most important thing is the score, not the attempts. So the score must be 80 or above. The attempts can be, I've set it at 3, but it can be anything. As soon as a child doesn't hit it at 3, hit the score threshold at 3, remember there needs to be intervention. A human being needs to come alongside the child to support them, to find out what it is that they're not understanding to hit that threshold. Right. So it's individualized, personalized, and then we did see some schools even lockstepped in some situations. Now, we are not saying that you can't. We are not prescribing how you go. The lockstepping for some schools worked really well, and it doesn't suit all schools, but that was one of the models that we saw, and it wasn't necessarily throughout the school. In some cases it was just in certain subjects or in certain grades. So I'm just throwing that out there that if for some of you that will solve some of your problems, that might be something to consider. Find someone who maybe embraces that model at another school and see if that would work for you. Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10 says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with half your might. Now it says, all your might, for in the grave where you are going, there is neither working nor planning, nor knowledge nor wisdom. So I've basically taken those 4 words: working, planning, knowledge, and wisdom. And I've addressed each of those because if it's in the scripture, it's important. So, work. The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. That's in Genesis 2 verse 15. So work for God is an important thing. He introduced it into the scripture right at the beginning. So that's why I say success comes before work only in the dictionary. Work is ordained of God.
Yeah.
So work smart, not hard. Find effective systems. Don't be afraid to change the way you've done things in the past. So if it doesn't work necessarily for this group, remember we're not prescribing, so maybe embrace a different model that you might find necessary for that particular group. Remember, SharePoint is a place where you can get information and you can give information. So if you've got something that you've created, a document or whatever, you can put it onto SharePoint and you can go onto SharePoint and get information from there as well. Please don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Some schools who have used, and I'll put it this way, historically a paper-based individualized curriculum, there are brilliant aspects of that curriculum that you can keep, that add value to your switched-on education. So don't throw them out. So for example, daily goal cards or record cards or whatever you want to call it, management cards or call it whatever you want. Keep them. Don't throw them out. Teacher record cards at the end of the day to record what the children have done, what they've got to do the next day. Pathway to graduation document, very helpful. We are not saying that we've got everything, we are saying you can embrace what adds value to switched on. Reward systems, please go ahead and use them. Don't think that because it's not part of switched on that I've got to throw all of that out and start again. That's not what we're saying at all. If it works and you can keep using it, go ahead. But please make sure that you have your non-negotiables, whatever your model is. Some schools are project-based, some schools are lockstepping, some schools are traditionally in their workstations with working independently. But whatever the non-negotiables are, please make sure that those you keep those. And then whatever system you have in addition to the switched on, if you're having goal cards, if you're having teacher record cards or whatever, make sure that those are done well. Make sure that they're useful, make sure that they're neat. So don't just have them and then have them half-heartedly. Because what did the scripture say? Whatever you do it with all your might. So if you're going to have a goal card system, do it well. Okay, insist the students write clearly. Insist the students do it the day before. Insist the students do it clearly, that kind of thing. Work with integrity. Deal with learners with fairness. Score your writer questions in lessons before the student or the learners attempt the quiz, as those questions may appear in the quiz. Some people are leaving the writer questions till after the students have done their quiz. Those questions that you didn't score in the writer questions in the lessons may show up in the quiz. If you haven't scored them, the student's just going to reproduce what he had in the lesson again. And if you haven't scored it and helped them and nudged them and given them good advice as to what they should and shouldn't include in their question, it's just going to show up again in the quiz. So that you need to be completing that before they write the quiz. So you can go into the system, if it's got an exclamation mark there, is manual grading. That needs to be done before the student or the learner writes the quiz. So please make sure that you do that, because you're working with integrity. You're requiring that of them, but then make sure that that standard also applies to you as the teacher. Otherwise they're going to say, but you're talking with a forked tongue. You're telling me to do that, but you're not doing it. So we need to make sure that we work with integrity with the learners. Cause them to work with integrity. So here's the thing. Notes are not a requirement. You do not have to do them. However, notes cause the student to engage with the work. Instead of just scrolling up the screen and jumping to the questions and having a go, and maybe even getting it in 3 attempts, because they just guess right through the 3 attempts, they're not learning because they're not engaging with the work. So do make sure that when a student comes to you and asks for a quiz to be unblocked, I'm not saying you have to do this, I'm saying a good practice that will produce children who are actually learning, engaging with the work, is to get them to actually produce notes. Now I know for some people that's huge, and I get that. So you need to train them young. Even if you've got to take some time out, stop the curriculum and take some time out to actually have a lesson where you teach them to recognize the important facts, the dates, the names, anything in bold, anything in italics. Usually the first or the last sentence in a paragraph contains the most important thing about that paragraph. You need to go in and teach them to do that. And then, because some of the left brainers will write everything because they're terrified of missing anything out. The right brainers are like, ooh, shoot, just put a word here or there. Okay, so you've got to teach them to do that properly. So it's no good writing notes when you get to the quiz, because you've already done the lessons. That's where learning takes place. That's where instruction takes place. That's where engagement takes place. So they must write the notes. Let me put it this way. Encourage your students. If that's going to be a standard that you have in your school, then you must keep the standard. So when they come to write the quiz, they need to produce the notes. So that it's one way of knowing that they've engaged with the work. One of the schools actually did this. It was very interesting. They told the children to write notes as they went through the work, and then to answer the questions they were to work only off their notes. So what that produces is, have they extracted the important information, because that's what the questions are going to ask you, important information. So I thought that was quite a nice cross-check as to whether they've actually engaged, written good notes, and then use your notes to answer the questions. That was quite a good check for me. If the children don't engage with the work, they will guess, and that's not education. So teach them to engage with the work. That's teaching them integrity, to do the right thing, and then the results should be there. The results should, the scores should go up if they begin to engage with the work. For weaker students, before you get them to write a quiz, check with them that they've understood their work. Orally quiz them, either out of their work or out of the quiz questions that you have on your computer, and check that they actually are ready. So you can work with the student, and it's almost a team effort. Okay, right, are you ready to write this? Let's check, are you ready? All right, let's, okay, all right, I think you maybe need to go spend some more time reading through your notes. Or, okay, you're ready. You'll get to know the students who are trying to not write notes and do that kind of thing. It's usually your weaker students that try and move away from that. Your brighter students will produce the notes, and you can make the decision to then just open their quiz. You don't necessarily need to quiz them and check that they're ready, because you know that they're a great student, they've engaged, they've learned their works of a high standard, good quality. Open it, but don't have to quiz them. It's just for those who would want to duck and dive, I guess, and ultimately they're not going to end up hitting the threshold anyway. So it behooves them to not produce the notes and engage with the work. And then plagiarism. Big flashing red lights. Plagiarism. Okay? Do not permit your students to plagiarize. They cannot just copy and paste If you are reading through a project or a writer section, whatever, that doesn't sound like the teenager, it probably isn't. They don't use fancy words. So, usually, some of them do, but usually most students don't use fancy words. So you want them engaging and writing it in their words so that they understand what they're saying. That if so the easiest way is to copy and paste the first sentence of their paragraph into a new tab, and it will take you to the website that they got it from. That's the simplest way. I know there are lots of products out there that you can put onto the computers and use as pleasure and checkers. So you can go ahead and install those if it needs to be, but the bare minimum is to copy and paste it in it, and then you can check where they've actually taken that information from. And don't be scared to reassign it, but they send it back to them to do it correctly. Remember, we're talking about working with our heart, with all our might. Then work in a team as staff. Have your team meetings or your staff meetings, whatever you want to call it. Make sure everybody's rowing in the same direction, with the same outcome, and be consistent. Children pick up in a heartbeat, and with this teacher I can get away with this teacher I have to do that. So make sure that you all understand what are the non-negotiables, you're sticking to the non-negotiables, you're all insisting on notes if that's what you're going to do, you're all doing the gold card, or you're not doing the gold card, or you're all doing the reward system, or you're not doing the reward system, just to keep it consistent throughout so that the children, if they move from one group to the other group, it's like nothing's changed. Everybody, this teacher knows the same as the previous teacher knew what I should and shouldn't be doing. Then the next one was plan. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. You all know that one's from Jeremiah 29:11. So you can plan for success. Planning is a God thing. He doesn't bless chaos. He doesn't increase chaos. So just a question, if you're wondering why your school's not growing, just make sure that you're planning and you're doing it well, whatever you're doing. Because if it's chaotic, there's probably not going to be increase. Because generally God doesn't increase chaotic. He first came and saw the earth and all the stuff was there, but he first put it into order before he increased it. So that seems to be the way I understand the principle of how God works with increase. So plan for success by having vision, which means you've got to sit down and decide what you're going to have, what you're going to include, what you're not going to include. Decide on new procedures that you want to include. Don't be too ambitious to start with. Just take one or two things that you maybe want to include. Okay, we've all decided we like this process. How are we going to do it? When are we going to do it? What are we looking for? And so on. So that you're all working together at the same time. But don't be over ambitious. You can always increase what you do. But if you add all these things and then it's too much to manage, rather do one or two things well, manage them well, and then you can include another thing and another thing and another thing. Children will figure you out very quickly. If they know don't know what you're doing, or one teacher does this and can play the other one off against the other one. So be consistent and make sure that the vision of the school is all one vision, and that everybody's checking for the same things, even if it's a homeschool academy with several teachers. You're all keeping the procedures the same. And then if you include something that's not working, don't be afraid to throw it out. So, and it's going to maybe work one year and maybe not the next year, but you must have a very clear-cut reason why it worked or why it isn't working, because you also don't want chopping and changing. So be careful of that as well. Plan for the learners to complete a year's work in a year. How do we do that? We do that by completing 2 learning activities per subject per day. Let me repeat that. you're pretty much guaranteed of getting a student or learner through a year's work, because a course is equivalent, is expected to be completed over a year, given that there's no catastrophe in the middle of the year. If life is equal, the student should be able to get through 1 year's work within 1 year. And they achieve that by completing 2 learning activities per subject per day. There's a number of schools that I went to whose eyes just grew big when I said that. Okay? So if that's all you hear me saying today, there's that, and the test and quiz can only be done once. If that's all you go back and straighten out, start with that, I'll be happy. So those are your non-negotiables. Okay? However, there will be times when either the work is tough, the children are off sick, or there's something like COVID that interferes with life, and it can't necessarily go in that way. But that's what you aim for. I'm talking about all things being equal, and life is normal. 2 learning activities per subject per day. If children are coming in at the bottom at grade 3, or coming in higher up but they've transitioned from a state school, then maybe you just want to try them on 1 thing a day per subject, just while they bed down, just while they get used to the curriculum. But try and get them to do across. I know some schools are doing it slightly differently, but I'm giving you what I know produces good results. So you're welcome to do it differently, but I know that these produce good results, and I know that pretty much guaranteed students will get through 1 year's work in 1 year if you do that. Plan often by having weekly team or staff meetings and agree on things together to make sure that the students can experience the same thing no matter which room they're in. Plan by introducing systems that will produce success, whatever your model. Don't do it just to do it for doing its sake. Okay? Make sure there's a purpose to why you are doing it. Please never leave, this is another non-negotiable, never leave learners working alone where they can be tempted to contravene a procedure by going on to Google, for instance. If you don't have filters on your system that block everything except maybe the curriculum, Bible Gateway and one other thing, and they can access Google, if you leave them on their own, they will be tempted. So that should be a non-negotiable. No learner gets left on their own to complete a quiz because now it's break time or a test and the rest of the group has gone off to whatever. A staff member must stay behind while that student is completing that. Never leave them alone on their own, otherwise you're going to put them in a place where they're going to be tempted to do the wrong thing. Plan projects for the learners. So sometimes not all the projects are available. I don't know why that is, but when either they go into a new unit or you open up a new unit, please make sure that all the projects are available. If you are the type of school that allows the student to choose the project. Because remember, if it's not assigned, they can't see it. So, but if you are a school that chooses what they see, then make sure you've skipped, chooses which project they do, make sure that you skip everything else and only leave that one assigned. Also, if you don't like any of the projects, remember every unit has always got the special projects available to complete. So if you don't like any of them, you can upload your own one. You can make it area specific, you can make it country specific, you can, except when it comes to the graduation track. If you're going to deviate anywhere there, please check first that that's an okay thing to do. Because as soon as we get onto the graduation track, we need to make sure that everything's done exactly correctly. Otherwise, like I said, you don't want a surprise at the end where you've gone off and decided something's a good idea, like, oh, let's do test twice. Okay, can't do that, and then you're going to have a problem when it comes to that horrible word of moderation. So let's make sure that if you're going to deviate from the project or anything within the graduation track, that you check it out first. In the maths, there are the performance tasks. You'll appreciate that maths doesn't really lend itself to projects, so they've included performance tasks. These are quite tricky. I don't know if you've noticed that, but what you can do is leave them available only for your really bright students, or you can use it as a group project that all the students, or you can break it up into groups and you can put one really bright child with maybe a group of weaker children, whatever, and try and use it as like a group activity. Or if you are working individually, then I would suggest, I'm not telling you have to do this, I would suggest you skip that for your average to weaker students. They are very challenging. Keep it open only for your very bright students. Otherwise it can cause a lot of frustration, and you'll find that they won't be getting through their two activities a day in the maths if you insist on them doing it, and they really don't have the ability to get through that. Please make sure that all projects and everything, whether it's writer questions, whether it's you've reassigned stuff or whatever, is all completed before the student goes on to the next unit. Don't allow them to go on, because what will happen is you'll wonder why you're having to open a lesson. Why am I having to assign a lesson? It's because the computer's indicating something previously is still open, or it's not completed, it's still assigned. So if you're finding yourself having to open lessons that shouldn't be the case, go back and you'll see, there's a project that hasn't been completed, or there's something else that hasn't been completed. Plan for tests to be completed on school machines, either in the room with a test monitor, as in person, or a computer lab with a staff member. Some schools have got beautiful situations where they can send them down and staff member can look after them in a separate room. I would suggest you make use of that. I also saw other situations where a student was working on their own computer in their room, amongst their students, other students. So that's not ideal. That should be a non-negotiable. Writing tests on a school machine that you know hasn't. The reason why we're doing that is because learners can store stuff on their computers. So as soon as you allow them to write a test on their own machine, you haven't got any control over what they've stored there. So they can access that while your back is turned. Whether they've copied and pasted stuff or whatever they've done, accessed other things. You don't have any control over that, but you do have control over your school machines. So make sure that you take them off their own machine, not even on a friend's machine. So, we'll swap machines. No, they might have already collaborated. So just make sure that you have your own school machines that you can put your learners onto right there. Even some schools are doing that with quizzes, but definitely for tests that they write on the school machine. Plan the day so that the learners have sufficient time to complete a test or quiz once they've started it. So remember, they're only allowed one attempt in a quiz or test, but then they may have started it just before break. Well, maybe it will be a good idea to give a heads up about 15 minutes before break and say, right, if you are in a quiz or test, just be aware that it's break in 15 minutes. Before you assign a quiz or a test or allow a student to take that, make sure there's sufficient time for them to complete it. Otherwise, then there are some of the highest subjects have really long tests, so it is definitely going to run through a break, or whatever you've got. Maybe you've got extra lessons or whatever. So it's maths, physics, chemistry, that they're 100 questions. So that just that pretty much that morning is going to be taken up just with that test. So be aware of that. Plan for that. And help them plan as well. Plan for load shedding. AISHCORM is making life tricky to navigate. So be prepared in advance. I do believe even while I've been here and been Airbnb, and they've said that's the schedule for load shedding. So I know they're out there. So just make sure that you plan for that. However, and it doesn't have to be that you've got to rush out and buy an expensive generator or anything like that. You can then maybe schedule stuff like group activities, group projects, experiments, practical science, practical maths. Use that time to do performing arts, recital of your Bible verses, art, crafts, sport. There are loads of things that you can do if you're not in a situation to be to go online because of load shedding. The other thing that you can do in advance, if you wanted to, some of the schools have looked at doing this, is print off, which is not ideal, but you can print off some of the work so that you've got that on hand for when, but then you've got to know exactly where they're going to be and when load shedding is, etc. So you have to get that. That's quite a tricky one to get right, but it can be done. Plan for a drop in Wi-Fi, and if a child is in I need Esther, but I see she's gone. She was going to give the sort of techie version of why this happens on the actual platform, but if she's not here, I'm just going to go on. So if a child is in a quiz or a test, and it's in the graduation track, and that's what we're looking at once that gets submitted. If the student has had to do a quiz or a test a second time because of circumstances out of their control, so it logs them out, it drops the Wi-Fi, anything like that, where basically it doesn't permit them to complete it, and therefore they have to attempt it a second time. Please keep a register of that, and we will then make sure that that tallies with the work that you submit later for that student. So don't think that that's actually a small thing, that's quite a big thing, because we don't want to misinterpret why the child has actually gone in twice. And if that is the case, they have to go in twice, don't just reassign the whole thing again. What you want to do is go in and only reassign the questions they didn't complete. Okay? Not the ones they got wrong, because they will also look like, oh, they need to do that one again. No, you've got to go in and check which ones they actually haven't completed. It should be the grey ones. So don't assign the ones that got wrong, because they're done. Just the ones that they haven't completed. And then keep a register of those times when that happened. Otherwise, we might query it as an irregularity. We don't want to misinterpret that. Then the next point was knowledge. My people are destroyed from lack of knowledge. That's in Hosea 4 verse 6. So you need to know the procedures, the non-negotiables that govern the system. No matter your model, that's up to you, especially as I've said in the graduation track. Make sure that when learners don't hit the score threshold in the quizzes or tests, and there are alternate quizzes or alternate tests, teach firstly into where they didn't hit the threshold the first time. It's no good you just open the alt one, because guess what? They're going to do the same thing again. You first need to teach into where they went wrong. So it's going to take a bit of time. You need to go into each question where they got wrong or partially correct. That might be might be 1 out of 5 that they have got. If it's 4 out of 5, they pretty much got it. But 1 out of 5 they haven't got. So to come up yellow, but you don't know how badly they didn't hit the threshold there. So it's important you go into each of those, certainly the ones that got wrong and those that are partially correct, so that you can teach into it before they move on to the alt one. That's very critical. I mean, once they've exhausted all the alt ones, and there are no more, which, by the way, appear in the math sections, which are really difficult. So you need to tell them that, because when they don't hit the threshold, it's a big deal for them. So just say to them, because they can't see the alts, the alt quiz or test, so you can see it, and so you can encourage them by saying, this work is tricky. So you're going to possibly have a couple of attempts to get through and try and hit the threshold. So be supportive and encouraging of that, so that if they do find it tricky, they've got another chance, and then maybe even another chance. But then you must be teaching in each time before they take the next chance, so they don't repeat the same mistakes again. Know to tell the learners about the old quizzes because they don't see it. Know the various subject choices for graduation, especially things that are evolving, like there's a new science course for graduation for those who are not necessarily, are not going the academic science route when they get to university. They're not doing medicine, they're not doing engineering and all of that. There's another science route. There's another maths track for those who are going to university, but they're not necessarily doing those subjects that require maths. So they can do a different, so to keep up to date with the information that's coming through, because it is a relatively new situation in South Africa, and we need to scratch where it itches, if I can say. So if something's not working, we need to fix it. Can't just keep going on like that. So if we can, that's the beauty of the system, that we can actually change it to suit the situation that you're in. So, so keep an eye on those updates that are either get sent, I think, either through WhatsApp or email. So make sure that if you are the point person, make sure that, because as I said earlier, only one person per school, please to contact Esty, otherwise she gets inundated with calls or emails or whatever. So one point person contacts Esty, or one point person goes and gets that information for the rest of the staff so that everybody knows the updates. Remember that attempts aren't as important as the score, and then know that when the alt things are there, it's because it indicates a difficult section. Know how placement tests work. I will be doing a session on the placement tests, how to give them to a student, where to find them, and then most importantly, how to interpret them, the results of the placement test, and how to then place the student on the curriculum based on the results of the placement test. That's critical. It could end up being a situation where a student could end up not completing anything using our curriculum. It might even be best that they stay where they are, because the placement test results are just, can't fix it on switched on, you know. We can't fix everything. So if you look at what time they've got left, how bad the prescription is, it might very well be best for them to stay where they are, because they'll get something. So, you know, don't be afraid of that either. It's very far and few between, but it does happen. Know when to place a course in credit recovery mode, CRX. I've got some glazed over faces. Okay? So it's a very helpful tool. Some people don't like it. Some people prefer the placement test to redo the placement test and then take it from there. That is another way of doing it. But there is the function with the CRX which then presents it. You have to remember to click it over to when you're assigning the course, you have to push it over into CRX mode. So then when it's presented to the child, it starts with the pre-test. If it doesn't have a pre-test, it's not in CRX mode. If you don't assign it in CRX mode, and then later on you discover, oops, I should have, you can't change it to CRX mode. You've got to assign it again. But then you can take the scores that you've got from before and just, don't keep it, because the computer registers all of that. So I will also be talking into the CRX mode when I do my sessions to help schools and bring additional support to them. But then there's times when you can use CRX mode, and there's times when you can't use CRX mode. And you can't use CRX mode indefinitely going forward. It can't, usually it'll be one course in CRX mode, and then from then on everything's placed in regular mode. It can't be CRX mode the whole way through. Then the last point is about wisdom. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given him. That's in James 1 verse 5. Have the wisdom of how to solve the learners, the parents, the staff, your teammate challenges. Share with each other, be understanding, and if you've got wisdom in a specific area, share it. Have wisdom to know when to approach parents about a learner who will need to lower the score threshold, which will affect the exit qualification. It's not a fun thing to do, because all parents think that their child's going to be a rocket scientist. So it's not easy for them to hear, and it's not nice news for you to deliver. But it's something that has to be done now and again. So have the wisdom, ask the Lord for wisdom, because that's what it says. You must ask Him for wisdom on how to deal with that difficult situation. ST, please remember to inform ST if you are going to lower the threshold, because then that will affect the exit qualification and then the issuing of the relevant documents. Remember, parents need to be informed all the way along that process, because they do not want surprises at the end, and you don't want to deal with that parent at the end if there are surprises. So have the wisdom to make sure they in all the relevant conversation that needs to take place around it. Have the wisdom of how to interpret the placement test. We've been over that earlier. It's important that you know how to interpret them so that you can place them on the curriculum without wasting time. And have the wisdom to know when to place a course in credit recovery as well. We've been through that one. Have the wisdom of how to correctly complete the pathway to graduation, and how to assist learners to correctly select their subjects to be able to access their preferred courses at university or college or wherever they are going. I came across a situation, and I've got 1 minute left, okay, where they have a brilliant, it was Rabuni, I'm going to plug for you. They had a system where you can find the learner's gifting, and that's very important for deciding where they go. Because again, parents might come with their preconceived ideas, and you know the child's not going to cope with it, or you know the child's better suited for something else. So there's a fabulous tool to discover what their gifting is, and you can all swamp Rabuni, they will know what that is. Okay. And then please have the wisdom to access SharePoint, because there's a lot of helpful information in there. And remember that these procedures that I've gone through are by no means conclusive. So please check out any updates that may come through. Please collaborate across schools, and we'll have that more interaction with schools once we go back and we put that all in place. We'll let you know. So we'll have special sessions for schools that are already running for a while, and they've got maybe more advanced questions to ask, as opposed to brand new schools where they're just looking at trying to get the basics in place. So we'll hopefully sort that out. And with 23 seconds to go, I hope you enjoyed the session. I hope it was informative. I'm sorry we've run out of time to do any questions and answers, but I don't have a session tomorrow, so if you need to ask me anything, I am around, and you can catch me, we can maybe chat through or whatever. That's it, I'm out. It's flashing red. I'm about to fall through the floor.